Another live stream from Landon Huber Studios. We will begin in just a minute. All right. So as you can see, what we have here is a comic book and a piece of paper. Adjust the camera just a little bit. So on the piece of paper, you'll see a drawing that I did actually last week where I drew the Henchtings. What are the Henchtings? The Henchtings are characters from this comic book here called the Punctuation Men. The Punctuation Men, and this is the character right here. The Punctuation Men is a superhero satire comic featuring superheroes based on punctuation marks. Now, really what it is just a funny concept and just a cool concept. So if you check back on some of the previous streams, I drew the period, I drew the apostrophe, and right now I'm drawing Henchthings, and they come in groups of dozens sometimes, and they work for the evil arch nemesis of the Punctuation Men, this guy, Renan Sentence, the evil Frenchman, which of course is a take on the words run-on sentence. So in the comic book, you see all these little Henchthings, and they work for this guy. And they go and invade this senior citizen care center to steal the teeth for Renan Sentence. They're all doing it for him. And then the Punctuation Men come and save the day. So it's a really cool comic. You guys gotta pick it up. And right now I'm selling bundles on eBay. So you can just look in the description, or you can find it on just by searching eBay bundles. But what we're going to be doing today, though, is inking this piece. Now, I did work on it and tighten it a bit from what I was able to get done on the previous stream. But the previous stream shows you pretty much the whole, how it all came together. And then I just went in and worked on it a bit afterwards to kind of flesh it out more, because this piece is a little bit more involved with all the different characters and everything. So now I'm going to be inking it. So let's begin here. Now, I don't usually have a particular place that I start inking. Like when I start inking, I don't like have an exact system. So, nor do you need one. What you do need is just to kind of be aware of what you're doing. And when I'm when I'm kind of inking, I'm trying to sort of like define the shapes. So what that means is you may see a bunch of sketching things going on, but it's your job when you're inking it to kind of know where to include some of that or where to not include some of that, you know. In every shape that you draw, really. And because the inking for this piece may see, now I'm going to bounce over here, so that's kind of just the way I work on stuff. These are all just part of a burst, and so they're going to be providing the image with like a contrast, you know. You'll see these, it kind of frames the image, you know. Yeah. I am just getting warmed up here. But yeah, when I ink, I tend to flip around the page a lot, so here we go. You know, the thing with drawing streams, you know, is even though I'm drawing these, or I'm inking, but it's still a live drawing stream, a live art making stream. Even though you're doing that and you're trying to keep it like a running dialogue, um, you know, what do you sit here and talk about for an hour? There's going to be, if somebody else is doing like a podcast with, you know, two people talking and they're having a conversation, obviously there's going to be more like back and forth, there's going to be more topics, there's going to be different personalities, but that's not what I'm doing here. I'm just creating, you know. And then there is something to be said, you know, creating is meant to be enjoyed, but it's not always necessarily something that's, you know, the most intriguing thing to watch live, you know. But we try. Because the interesting, because I like to watch it too. So the interesting thing is, I think for artists, you know, more, and just to just to kind of be able to see somebody else doing it, you know. So I'm gonna move this just for a minute, even though that's my promotion there, so I can have a little bit more ability to flip my page around here. Yeah, the Punctuation Men is a really cool comic, and you know, I care about it, and I'm gonna be working on it for a while, guys. I want to see it, you know, get more successful. And, you know, even if you don't, you know, buy copies, even just sharing the video or liking the video helps. If you think it's cool. If you don't think it's cool, then, you know, don't bother. But if you do think what I'm doing is cool, I would really appreciate it. Because I don't know, I can't foresee, you know, how long I can continue to work in obscurity over here. Not from my choice, but from almost just from like life, you know. Because I want to see Punctuation Men do good. I want to put out a second issue, and I am going to put out another issue soon, actually, within a few months here. Is this dead air? Not really. I mean, inking is happening. My videos aren't only meant for, you know, listening. Gotta watch them. But then again, if you just want to listen to my wonderful voice and speaking, that's okay with me too. And you see, like right here, I'm working on his foot. There's a lot of that is just going to shadow there. All right, I'm gonna start just kind of getting the bursts in as much as I can here, because that's gonna help me. And I don't know, my my hand is not feeling. I don't know if it's because I got too much caffeine or not enough caffeine. My hand is a little bit on the wobbly side today. You gotta keep going, man. You gotta keep pushing it forward. And that's how I really feel, you know. I don't get me wrong, you know, I wanna push as much as I can and do the best I can. That's always the attitude I have. Everything I've done has not been easy. I can say that much. Because this stuff isn't easy, you know. What's easy is, you know, doom scrolling, watching endless Barney reruns. I'm gonna Is it okay if I diss on Barney? Sorry for you Barney lovers out there. When I was a kid, I grew up watching Mr. Rogers, you know. I still like Mr. Rogers because he was actually pretty, he was like really nice, but he was also smart and talented and pretty cool and informative, and you know, to a kid, of course, he made you feel good about yourself. I mean, I didn't have like, I had good parents, but my dad was a fireman, and so sometimes he wasn't there for, you know, stretches of time, and I was just a sensitive person. I still am. And sensitive doesn't mean just like, you know, easy to get your feelings hurt. It although that can be a part of it, but it also just means sensitivity, you know, something that's more sensitive. I I've always been a person who's a little bit more sensitive to things, to feelings, you know. And you know, sometimes that can make life a little bit harder. But Mr. Rogers, he had a way of, you know, not only making a good, you know, entertainment, but creating like a this beautiful little world that you could learn things in. And I'm just I liked Mr. Rogers more than Barney. Okay, that's what the point of all this that I'm saying is. And you know, history has showed he was an outlier in what he did. You know, no, there's never been anybody like him. You know, the guy in the Barney suit could have been an axe murderer for all we know. But Mr. Rogers wasn't afraid to show who he really was. That's what that whole show was. You know, he's like, watch me come home and put on this sweater and sing you a little song. You know. Now, but you know, because it's show business, of course, there's going to be some. It's not like he's showing you everything, and you wouldn't want to see everything. You know, maybe he was having a bad day one morning, eating breakfast before he had to go to work again, and got a little bit grumpy. But he probably apologized. You know, he was that kind of a person. I'm not. I'm not. I try to be kind, but I'm not as kind as Mr. Rogers. I try to be a kind person, but I I'm working on it. That's my goal, is to be as nice as Mr. Rogers. It's a beautiful day in Landon Huber Studios. Thanks for coming by. Will you be mine? Will you be mine? Thanks for coming by Landon Huber Studios and watching me ink the Punctuation Men characters. Will you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? See? I got some Mr. Rogers in me, after all. So you see what I'm doing here when I'm inking this part in here? I'm getting quite a bit of ink, but the ink is flying off my brush quite fast here. But I'm just kind of flicking it to try to get some dry brush effect, because I think it might look kind of cool that the backs of the bursts here are a little bit split up. I didn't like what. Sometimes it works with you, sometimes it doesn't. And sorry guys, like I have to use this paper. I know it obscures what I'm doing a little bit, but if I don't, I'm going to be smudging and all over the place here. And I know you don't want to see that. I know you want the art to be good, just like me. Yeah, so a little bit of, info about myself, who I am, my channel. So you'll see on this YouTube channel, I have different categories, different playlists. And you guys should definitely go check out my playlist. I have art process videos. So art process videos are more like, they're more like edited movies, like where I show you things in an edited way, and you kind of see the art evolving. But I do them in a way to kind of actually really show you whatever the process of the process that I'm doing in the video. If it's oil painting, then I'm showing you like all the steps I went through, I know some other people like to like start when a painting is like 90% finished and stuff, and you just see them kind of throw a few lines, and that's fine for them. But I really wanted to show like what happens, like going from a blank page and how it gets created. Now, what you're seeing, what I'm doing here is doing the first penciling stage in a live stream, and then coming back a week later and showing you the final inking stage in another live stream. And so that's what I'm doing here. But you can see I'm just now actually starting to really get into the ink, to like starting to flow with it. Like it took me however long that was to just start having kind of confidence with the marks I'm making, and picking up the speed a little bit. Like when you first get started, your brain's a little fuzzy, and then after a while of doing it, you kind of click into just the flow mode, And I would say at this moment is about as much flowy as I'm gonna get here. Because even though I know you guys have a lot of things to do and you're very busy, I want to make this picture turn out good, Let me see. I'm not sure about that little shape right there. Sometimes if you just see something, even though when logically it's like, oh, well, that maybe that should be there. Well, maybe it shouldn't be there, you know? You don't have to draw everything. And in fact, sometimes if you look closely at the masters, you know, they're not drawing everything. And they're more concerned with shape flow and, you know, visual hierarchy in the terms of not having everything be the same amount of detail or the same shapes, or, you know, because the eye likes difference. The eye likes to see as it flows around, and in image it wants to see something change, right? So huh, all right, cool, getting somewhere here. Yeah, so inking, um as from what I've been hearing, has kind of been turning into somewhat of a lost art in comics. Of course, like if you look at the reason for it in the first place, it had much to do with just the practicality of creating the stuff, right? And the printable, getting it printable. But there's also another reason for it. And the other reason for it is, and the other reason for like this sort of style in comics is, um when something is super rendered detailed, it slows it down, you know? Like you'll even notice like on Bernie Wrightson, on his like cool like comic book work, like take Swamp Thing, for example. He'll have detailed areas, but then also really simple areas. And then some of his cooler images are more just like high contrast, less detail, and maybe only detail on like the hands or some roots or something, you know. But this idea that everything becomes detailed, um, because people see his like Frankenstein work and they see how detailed that is, and it's very rendered, but it's done so, and it's an illustration now. So now the purpose is he wants you to get stuck on that one image. You know, he wants you to linger around that one image forever. And because there's not multiple images within, like, because a comic book has story beats, right? It's got like a square here and another square, because you're reading a story. Boom, boom. Now, when you overly detail it, it can have a tendency to slow that reading down. And also visually, the fact of multiple story beats on a page now that's like almost duplicating the imagery, right? So to the eye, having multiple like detailed panels, it actually doesn't work good. And it might work better if one was detailed, one was simplified, one was open, then another detailed, then simplified. You know, finding a way to break it up so that not every panel is the same is usually visually more appealing to the eye than, you know. Now, of course, there's no rules, but this is just a bit of a secret that or a bit of useful information that I've found, you know, through making that very mistake. And and painted comics are beautiful, but my earlier point, what I was going to say is that they just take so long. You know, so for the practicality of speed, of the fact that, you know, in the comic book medium, they have to literally produce a book a month. Um, there's just no way you can produce high quality painted work that fast. Just, you know, unless you had like, unless you had like multiple painters, and then the problem would be now the book wouldn't have a consistency. Like, say, if it was just a 22 monthly comic, a 22 page monthly comic, or I guess they're 20 pages now or whatever, but you'd be having all these different artist styles. Plus, on top of that, the, you know, brutal, you know, reality of the market is that there, if you were to do that, it wouldn't sell probably any better than enough to justify the extra costs, because, you know, paintings just take so long. So part of the style of comics has to do with the marketplace of comics, you know, the market of comics. But, you know, there's been people who have done painted comics that are really, really cool. So Simon Bisley and many others. But like, you know, Frazetta, when he started doing painting instead of comics, you know, he went full bore into the painting illustrations, you know, and he didn't try to combine the two necessarily. And what I'm saying here is not at all like anybody who's done a painted comic. I'm not like I'm not trying to tear that down in any way. You know, I think it's awesome what you've done, but I'm just kind of pointing out some logistical realities, I guess. So yeah, that's why even inking itself is becoming, as they say, kind of like a lost art, because it's like, oh well, why do I need an inker? I can just have AI ink it, or I mean, unfortunately, there, you know, I'm see every time AI comes into the conversation here, I'm gonna go off on a rant, but I'm just sick of it, you know. I'm sick of seeing it all the time. Like I wanna, I would like for what I because I know I know I'm not seeing something real, you know? I'm not seeing something that was, like, put any effort into by, like, another human being, you know? I mean, maybe there's prompting effort and whatnot, but man, what connected me, and I've said this in other streams, but I'll say it again. What connected me to everything that inspired me to wanna do art, it was the fact that another human being had done it, you know? And not just that fact that they had done it, but that all their little idiosyncrasies and, you know, mistakes and all that stuff was just beautiful, right? And that just all gets wiped out with AI art. It's just obliterated. But anyway, back to my original thing I was talking about was that so with the inking, like being done, like either just skip the step, you know, or do it AI or do it like it, like I don't know. I don't use AI in my art, you know, and I'm gonna keep it that way because I feel it the more you use it, you know, if there's things you have to use some level of it for, like I don't know, figure out something, then okay, but you do it yourself as much as possible, you know. Feel proud of what you've done. Let's get back to that beauty. Can keep AI where it belongs, you know, but let's not replace all the beautiful things that humans can do just because a robot can do it faster. Comment below if you agree with me. Let's get some activity on this video because you know these videos are not going to get pushed if there isn't some more interaction. I mean, come on, guys. I know some of you guys are watching these videos. Can you please just click like, leave a comment? Well, it's up to you. I'm not going to live my life by what the algorithmic clickbait because I think that's all what's kind of creating the world like the way it is right now. And you know, I'd rather use the tool of YouTube or social media. I'd rather use that to get across my ideas, not to manipulate an algorithm or something. And, you know, maybe you agree, maybe you don't like it, maybe you do. You know, that's totally your choice. But I just feel the world needs more authenticism right now, because it's getting de-authenticized by AI, by the rigors of capitalism. So let's try to get authentic. Get authentic. Like, really though, that'd be a good idea. So here we are. We're still inking here. We're getting some progress. I need to get some ink on my brush. I'm using right now I'm using a Winsor Newton #4 with Sumi ink. Series 7. Sometimes when you're working on something, you're not totally like, this is kind of part of why like streaming and talking is difficult, because I don't know if it's the right brain or the left brain, but one of the sides of the brain, I'm definitely stronger on that side as a thinker. And I've even been tested. And so when you're talking and streaming, you're having to tap into two sides of the brain there, and sometimes it actually is harder to access the creative sides, the creative part of the brain, the right side, because now you're having to tap in the left side for all the conversation that you're doing. So sometimes it does make it a little bit harder. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, you can see at the beginning of this, like this drawing is not the kind of thing you can bang out in an hour. And so this stream might go for 2. And we might just have to get as much done as we can. But anyway, as I'm working around it, and then I start to, like my brain starts to see the areas that are getting done, then I don't know, it starts feeling like I can see it coming together now. But at the same time, I don't want to rush it too much and ruin the picture, so I'm not going to do that. just watched Rocky recently. Let me tell you like a little kind of story about my um experience with that film. Um when I was a little kid, there's even video somewhere that my mom has back in like the late 80s, early 90s, around that time. So this is on VHS tape video. There's this video somewhere of me as a baby running around in diapers and I'm punching like Rocky. Because, as a kid that movie was popular at that time. But the movie that we were watching was actually Rocky 3, right? When the one where he fights Mr. T. That was actually the first Rocky movie that I ever saw. Shake out the hand a little bit. Now, the first so when I'm a kid and when I'm a baby watching Rocky, that's the movie I'm seeing. And it wasn't, it had the music and it was inspiring to a kid, a toddler, in the way that it would be, Rocky, I want to be like Rocky. Now, fast forward years later, like now maybe I'm still a kid, but I'm a little bit older of a kid. And I see Rocky 2 for the first time. So now I'm going backwards. First I saw Rocky 3, now I saw Rocky 2. And I thought it was cool from, the perspective of a whatever I was at the time I saw that one, like maybe 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there, 12. So I definitely was aware of Rocky. Uh, and that's the one where he goes back for a rematch. And I was watching these things on like recorded VHS tape. So it was like not even sometimes it wasn't even the full movie. It was just whatever. It was like the TV version of the movie that because you could like record if something came on TV, you could record it on your VHS tape. So people would have all these like stuff that they had just captured that had come on television, and they would just capture it on the VHS back then. So you could replay it later and watch it, if it was something cool, like a movie or MTV or whatever. I still have some of these VHS tapes. But anyway, so that's how we would watch some of these movies. I would go in my uh, parents' closet and have to search through and look at the little writing on the names of because there was like VHSs that had been bought in, and then there was like the VHSs that just had little little things written on the sides, and you had to read what the thing was to find the right video. So that's probably how I was watching Rocky 2, was on one of those. So I thought Rocky was cool, of course. I was very aware, but I had picked up the story from what I had seen from those ones. I saw Rocky 4 too, somewhere intermingled in there as well. Um, But I had still, by age 12 or 13, 14, I had still never seen the first one. Until somewhere around age 16, 17, or 18, somewhere in there, you know, I'm a little bit older, maybe had a couple dollars in my pocket, and could go down to a local, bookman's that sold like VHS tapes, and I found it there because for whatever reason we just didn't have that one. It had never come on TV to where my parents could have recorded it or whatever. So finally, at around in my mid-teens or so, or late teens even, I finally see the first one. And my initial reaction was, "Oh wow, it's really different from the other ones." I thought it but I thought it was like special in a certain way. But at that age, I still probably wasn't old enough to like even have the full appreciation of that movie, like of how amazing it is. Like I knew it was good, but I was kind of more confused a little bit, like, oh, it's different than the other ones, right? But upon later viewings, after I had lived life longer, and especially just now because I just watched it again recently, that is a beautiful film. That is an absolutely amazing, beautiful film. Rocky, the first Rocky. It's got so much heart. It's about something. It's like, man, it can change. It has the seeds of it's really the best kind of movie that there is. There's nothing better than that to me. It's like the top of the top because it taps into something real, and it's just so amazing. And then you hear the story behind the making of it is also amazing. But it's an amazing film, guys. So that's my story of Rocky. It made an impact in my life. So thank you, Sylvester Stallone, and everybody else who was involved. Just that was amazing. All right, let's try to get something going on this face here. I've been sidestepping it the whole time. Even the music is just really awesome. Bum bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum 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 ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum bum ba ba bum ba ba bum ba ba bum do 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 do. Bum bum ba ba bum bum. It's just oh, amazing. Sorry if my bald head is getting in the way sometimes here. And one of my favorite inkers from comics is a guy by the name of Mark Farmer. And he was there's not much information about him. Like I think he did like one interview in his whole life or something like that. There's just almost hardly anything you can find about him, but he's an English guy from what I saw, and he had just a beautiful way of inking. I don't know if he had some secrets, but it was just really beautiful. And he was predominantly, and I only know this because there was like one inking book made that I read, and where they interviewed inkers, and he was predominantly a brush inker, but he also used he did use um, the what's it called, the nibs. He but that he kind of used nibs, I think, sparingly, but mostly what he used was brushes, and he used like different size brushes. So he had like everything from larger to smaller size brushes. All the way from like 05, 04, all the way down to 00. So something about brush that is very versatile, and there's a reason it's been like the go-to for comic inking for the last 6 centuries. No, I mean, when you think about it, comics have not been around that long, you know? I mean, they really haven't. It, the comic book, meaning a book with with a story with sequential art inside, that didn't even exist until the 1930s, you know? Before that, there were comic strips, you know, in the newspapers, um, which were very popular, but nobody had ever thought to just make a book of just the comic part, you know. They were just like a, you know, something that came out in newspapers that was sort of there to assist the newspaper, or I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but they were there as an appendage to the newspaper, right? So while you're reading about the news of the world, what's going on, and you can read a funny little comic, you know, about something. And then somebody had some like extra, you know, some extra room on their press, and they said, "Hey, why don't we like just take all these comic strips and combine them all and see what happens, you know? Maybe we can sell these. Maybe." And you can imagine, like, you know, back in the 30s, like, they're probably chomping on a cigar there. Yeah, what do you think? What do you think there, fella? Maybe we could sell these. Who knows, you know? Because that's, I guess, how everybody in the 30s talked. I don't know. Anyway, they basically, that's what they did, you know? They printed them out, and then they were using them. Still, they weren't the feature, you know? They were still like, they used them as a loss leader, like, hey, you know, buy these product, buy the milk at the, and they started putting them on the newsstand, maybe, and then you'll get a free comic. Look at this, a free comic book, you know? People are like, oh, what's this? A comic book. And it's, you know, just called something like the Famous Funnies, which is just a collection of the stuff that was in the newspapers, all combined in a little book, you know? Oh, that's cool. And then they noticed the sales were doing pretty good on the using them as just a loss leader. You know, people were like, "Oh, cool, I'll take one. Yeah, cool, thank you." And then somebody said, "Hey, wait a minute. Maybe let's not give these away for free. Let's put a cheap price tag on them, 10 cents, and maybe we can make some money." And that's what they did. And sure enough, what do you know? They put them out on like Friday, and then by Monday morning, they were totally sold out. People were buying them. And that was the beginning of the comic book business. Pretty cool, huh? It all kind of stemmed from there, you know, the whole thing. But it's also rooted in like American capitalism too, you know. Just by following the breadcrumbs of the true story I just told, you know. That's how it that's how it came to be, you know, and many things happen from there, you know. Like the first appearance of Superman, the Action Comics #1, actually the Superman story in there, uh, you're gonna have to. I'm not like a historian, but it wasn't like the whole comic book, you know. It was just an actual a feature of what they were trying to promote, which was all these action comics, right? It was kind of like a new idea because they had the detective comics, they had, romance, I think. And so it was like, oh, we can make comics with action. So the other story ideas, most people have never heard of, but the whole concept behind Superman as a superhero, that was the genesis of it right there. That Action Comics #1. Oh, it was almost something people had never really like thought of before. I'm sure some people had thought of it, but it didn't become like a concept, a superhero, like oh, he's got superhuman strength. He's got this ability and that ability, and he can do this and that, and he can, jump over a building in a single bound. And I don't even think he could necessarily fly in the original issues. That was something that kind of came later, I think, after Charlton Comics had made um, Shazam, or he was called Captain Marvel at that time, but the character that now is known as Shazam, right? I think Superman's flying ability was actually influenced by Shazam's flying ability, which is kind of interesting because I don't think he actually could fly in the original comics, or at least it wasn't like a written into the story. But as soon as like Superman started becoming this huge success, that's when you got you know, Charlton and all these other companies, because as you know, as soon as something takes off, you're going to have a lot of people trying to cash in, right? And so that's what happened with this concept of superhero action comics. And so then you suddenly, by the late 30s, early 40s, that became the golden age of comic books, you know? What is this stuff, you know? And then, whip pan years down the line, and it just influences generations because a kid finds this stuff, and a kid is like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, At least when you're a nerd like I was. But hey, It's okay to be a nerd. How long have I been going on here, guys? Let's see. 70 minutes. Okay, that's not as long as I thought. I'm gonna turn on an extra fan because it's starting to feel a little bit hot to me here. And I'm gonna snack on this thing here. Okay. Every once in a while, it's a good idea to sort of wash out your brush. I think it's very, I don't know, kids, young people maybe, tend to be more just influenced by whatever's directly around them, whatever is coming through their cell phone apps, I guess. But at some point, learning about the way that things work becomes more interesting. Learning about the way that things came to be, especially if it's something that you're interested in. For me, that would be comic books. Because it's very creative, comic books, right? Even if can be a meat grinder of a business in a very competitive atmosphere. It's not every business in this world that is like so creative, like comic books. If you're a comic book creator or a comic artist of any kind, you will inevitably be faced with having to be creative, right? You have to create something. That's like a lot of the like old school comic artists, like in interviews they would talk about it, that they were just trying to put food on the table, make a living. you know I I think that's definitely a part of it, but I also feel that there are some creators with oh, that was a bad line. There are some creators which saw it as a way to make a living, but at the same time, they weren't just doing the best only because they had to sell books. They were doing the best they could because they actually loved this sort of stuff. They actually liked what they did for a living. Like Joe Kubert talked about that all the time, how he loved what he did. um Strangely enough, John Buscema seemed to he was kind of like a dichotomy or something. He had a really big influence, but I think there was a side of him that just, maybe when he was younger he cared more, and then maybe as he kind of got older he got a little bit disillusioned. And that can happen to people, you know. But man, you gotta try to remember how you're lucky to even be able to do this stuff, and the just the love that, you know, you give to people, and that's right there is the fear I have about the possible negative effects of, well, I should say the probable negative effects of something like AI art. And because if the love that people have for this medium starts to waver, then the reason that artists have to create will also start to waver, I think. Because that love is kind of like the life force of it, you know. The happiness of when an artist sees somebody, or a kid, or, you know, a teenager, or an adult that actually likes their work and gets something from it, you know, even if it's just some appreciation of like, oh, that's cool what you do. That's really awesome. That goes a long way to help the people doing it to want to keep doing it. You know, just that little bit of, not just validation for the sake of validation, but just knowing that you did something that matters in a positive way to other people, you know. As we're all sort of in this world, like wondering what we're doing here, right? So if you are a comic book fan, just realize that, you know, your appreciation is very much appreciated by the artists. Now, you know, everybody's different. You know, you hear horror stories about like some artists that kind of treat fans rudely and stuff. That's that's just a defense mechanism. Somewhere deep down, they appreciate that you know, that you care. So they just turn into curmudgeons, and but that's just a defense mechanism. It's like Spider-Man. It's like his little, what was it? They were talking about his defense mechanism in the first Spider-Man movie. How the spiders will do something, and he points out it's a defense mechanism, and then Mary Jane's like, "Oh, very interesting, Peter. You're so smart," you know. Hmm. I think what I'm gonna do, guys, is on this stream. This will be the longest stream I've done. I'm just going to go ahead and go for about 2 hours. So about 120 minutes. And then wherever this thing is by the end of that, because I've noticed my concentration is starting to slow down a little bit now. So I'm trying to force myself to pick it up a little. But wherever this thing is, this image, this picture I've been working on is at the end of 2 hours. That's where I'm gonna call the stream. Yeah, I stream every Saturday. And I'm really going to try to do that. If there happens to be a Saturday where I can't because of life, then I will, for sure try to be back on the next Saturday. And then if anything ever comes up to where I'm going to have to step away from streams for a bit, because I don't ever foresee that this is going to be something that I completely stop doing forever. For sure, it's going to be something that I might have to step away for a while if other things are going to be more important, pressing on my time. But for the foreseeable future, as long as I'm alive, I can see myself doing a stream every Saturday for quite a while here. Or near to. And now I tend to stream, the times I tend to stream are Saturday, somewhere between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Somewhere in there, probably, somewhere around 11, 12, 1, somewhere in there. So if you ever want to, like, join in on the stream or catch the stream, ask a few questions, just letting you know that's the time to do it, So go ahead and turn your notifications on if you care to, join in on a stream with me and ask me some questions here. Of course, if the questions are rude or, in any way, I can take a little bit of a, pushback or whatever. Sometimes I can handle it, but if it gets out of hand, then I'm just gonna have to block you. So, but I'm pretty. I don't block for no reason unless it's just somebody trying to cause fights or trying to, ask questions that are rude or devised in a way to ruin my life. So if that's what you're trying to do, then I'm going to block you. So far, that hasn't been a problem, but I know that as channels start to grow, that on a free to join kind of platform like YouTube, I know that can become a problem. purpose of the live streams is to, you know, promote my skills, obviously, but also to have fun and you know, open up creative doors and stuff. So if anybody asks like particular art questions and stuff, I'm gonna answer them in the way that I would answer them. Um, I'm not the type to like try to show you how to draw everything, but I'm more the type to kind of talk about overall concepts and then that I know, and then, you know, see what you can do. But maybe this isn't even really much of a teaching channel. You know, maybe it's more of a just watch me do what I do here, you know. It just depends on what happens over time, I guess. I'm feeling a little bit hungry. Get this little hand in there. Yeah, I know the comic book business is changing, or it's always changing. It's always evolving. Of course, now a lot of people are doing things on Kickstarter, and I can definitely see me going down that direction. You know, if I can build up enough of even a small following on here of people that might actually go support something I would do on Kickstarter. So tell your friends. Tell your friends that they should come and watch a guy draw pictures. Um, because it's, you know, uh, probably the most entertaining thing on the internet, I would say. And for anybody that's actually stuck with me this long, thank you. Thanks for hanging in there. I love you. So at some point, I'm gonna be selling these, you know, as like prints and t-shirts and stuff. I do have already. I have a store. It's LandonHuberStudios.com. You can find a lot of Halloween art there. That's the main thing I sell, but I'm also surreal art you can find. high quality surreal art prints, which I sell on Displate. There's kind of like the main places to go where if you want to buy my stuff right now is eBay, Landon Huber Studios. You can find my stuff there. My website, landonhuberstudios.com, where I sell all my Halloween t-shirts and also you go basically that's the main hub, you know, for everything I'm gonna do. You can find me on social media, Instagram at Landon Huber Studios, and Facebook, Landon Huber. You know, everything is just Landon Huber Studios. So I do have a Twitter, but or an X, but I don't post there anymore. Really, it's kind of a dead platform. Posted a little bit on Kara. I mean that's the main problem is that, you know, these places used to be places that artists could build a following, and I suppose they still are to some degree, but man, the algorithm is just really hard on you now, you know? And one of the reasons is the excessive proliferation of content, right? In a sea of water droplets, how do you be the most beautiful water droplet? It's like trying to find a needle in a stack of needles. I'm just gonna take this off for now. Thank you for coming to Landon Huber Studios. Thank you for coming to Landon Huber Studios and watching me draw, because that's like what I like to do to you. Doesn't make it easier just because you got a studio. A studio. A studio, yo. If I had a yo-yo, I'd be like, yo, I got a yo-yo, yo. Actually, I do like yo-yos. Yo-yos are fun. They're kind of like they're kind of like the first stress ball, you know? When you fling the yo-yo out, you feel the stress kind of just leaving your body. Hmm. Oh, man. This one was a monster, man. Meaning, am I biting off more than I can chew? Well, not, art-wise, of course, because, paintings can take, spread over days or weeks or months or years sometimes. But, for a couple-hour live stream, maybe it was biting off a lot to draw this multiple character thing. Luckily, Henchtings all tend to be kind of the similar in the what they are, that they're all just kind of like little four-armed bald guys with no toes and kind of big heads, and they're always angry, and they're always have one motivation. It's the one thing that keeps them, when they wake up in the morning and they're brushing their teeth, and maybe they don't even brush their teeth, but they probably just wonder, like, what am I here for? Well, they don't have to wonder that, because they know. And they're there for one reason, and that reason is to serve the evil Frenchman Renan Sentence, who talks like this. Hello, my name is Renan Sentence, and I am an evil Frenchman. Okay, that wasn't the best I've ever done, but he kind of talks like that. You can see some of these other videos I've been putting out, some of these reels where I reenact some of the stuff from the comics. Yeah. And I try to capture Renan's voice like that, It's from this comic, guys. Very cool comic. I'm also thinking, because I have a fear that I won't be able to come up with interesting things all by myself here to talk about nonstop, that maybe sometimes I won't talk so much. So if you join in on a stream, ask questions, okay, that opens up a door of conversation. But if I ever just kind of fizzle out from talking, here, then I'm just gonna draw silently for these beautiful little moments of what the old 1940s radio days would be called dead air. Just like the killer, you know. It's dead air! It's dead air! Got to commercial! I know. There's just no way to draw these little hand details fast. You gotta get in there, and the brush has to make all these little marks, and you can't just go, you know. I have to really. Really get in there and make 1,000 little. I mean, because it is a splash, you know, it is so many little characters that, you know, there's just no way to do that quickly, is there? When I started drawing these guys again, at first I wasn't sure if they had 3 fingers or, but no, actually they got 4. They're kind of like more humanesque. A lot of those old cartoons, they drew them with 3 fingers because it looked better that way, you know. As a simplified cartoon, it would appear a little bit strange, and not quite as nice looking and flowing and everything if the cartoon characters had full humanistic finger counts. So they figured all that out, you know, like those cartoons, it's not like somebody just sort of like snapped their fingers, and like they worked like crazy, experimented like crazy to iterated like crazy to come up with what they finally came up with there, that you saw, to see that end result that you saw, you know. That's the reality. You don't see behind the curtains of everything, of how much actually goes in. Kind of in a way, what I'm doing right here is actually kind of trying to show you a bit behind my curtains. You know, even though it may be a slower paced thing, hey, at least you get to see quite a bit of actual, actual inking here. What it kind of looks like, what it kind of feels like. I would have loved to see more of that from my favorite artists, but you know, it wasn't as much back then of a, obviously before they even had video, that it wasn't even possible. It'd be like burning through film, you know. Every second of film was like $600. So that's why like when that was that's the thing though, that why it made those older movies so good. Like film was expensive to shoot, and so you didn't even roll camera until you were all set up, ready to go, and maybe you could get what you needed to get in one take, you know. Of course, there's directors who worked in more, shooting more film into the budget, like people like Stanley Kubrick. But um, I don't think that excessive footage really helps you. It actually slows you down, especially in the editing, because now you got to choose between 600 different takes, and maybe 50 of them are just as good as the other ones, you know. And during the shooting, so sometimes certain shots will require a few more takes. Like from my own filmmaking experience, you know, if it's a tricky shot and like multiple things have to line up, you know, at the same time, like a camera move plus a certain, you know, actors having to do a certain thing, and you know, when those are the hardest shots to pull off, is ones where there's multiple aspects to the shot, like, you know, and you want it to all happen in one shot. Like, I heard a story about Sam Raimi when they were shooting Army of Darkness, and he had this idea of getting this one big panoramic shot, and they just worked on this thing for like weeks and trying to get this one shot right. And finally he just said, okay, well, it looks like we're gonna have to break this up into a million little pieces, because this, right, you know, people aren't hitting their cues. And yeah, those shots are the hardest to get, man. Those ones where multiple things have to line up. Because think about it, you know, if you got a camera move and you got this and this and this and all these things have to happen, and then one aspect is wrong, okay, well, you got to redo the whole shot again, right? And then also directors are working up against strict studio budgets and stuff too. So you you have to all, I think in life we're always up against some kind of a constraints by the real world. Like, the real world is oppressive, you know? The real world wants to say, you can't do it for that much money, you have to do it for this much money. Or you don't have this much time, you have this much time. Or, you know, you can't use this aspect, so now you gotta use. So what you have to do to get anything done is navigate the reality constraints up against what you can do to make something possible, to get as close as possible to achieving your original vision of something, you know? Because ultimately, that's the main goal, is just to get that vision made, make it happen in whatever way you can, you know? And sometimes you gotta let the little stuff go so that you don't lose the big stuff. And that's kind of because I'm kind of a stubborn, you know, person creatively, because I don't like to live with something unless I'm happy with it, you know? But in the process of making something, you're not going to be happy with every single thing, right? You're at some point you are working with what you have. It's like, okay, I have these shots and that's what I got, you know. I have this uh and that's what I got. And if there's a problem in there, you either have to work through how to solve the problem, live with the problem, mask the problem. You know, it's like, what do you do? Most of the time you try to figure out how to solve the problem. That's the best way. But, you know, again, like especially like with shooting a film or something like that, you're working with what you have, you know, what you can do. Sometimes budgets go on because what happens is that when people start actually editing the film together, you start finding all the holes in the edits. Like, it's like, oh man, I need a shot that where I just need this extra little beat, because films actually, that's what films are, is they're edited things, right? They're edited constructions of something. They're not, the principal photography is just capturing the raw data you need, but the film is completely made in the editing, you know, using that raw data that you got from the film shoot and all that. So anyway, oh, okay, let's check the time because I might be due for a little breather here. All right, we're at 114 minutes. I'm gonna go for 6 more minutes on this stream, guys, and then we're gonna call it a day for this stream. I'll have to finish the rest of this inking off camera and not live. But the good news is that if you like watching, you can come back next week for another live stream. And next live stream will be a drawing stream. So for the time being, I'm kind of going back and forth. I'm doing a drawing stream and inking stream. Drawing stream and inking stream, like that. And kind of get some broken up kind of texture looking here on this guy's head. The the Henchtings skin texture it's almost kind of like it's like really gritty, and it's like, I don't know, just gritty, like this gray gritty skin. uh, yeah, it's hard to do these little detail areas when your brain's like kind of tired. Let's try. So, yeah. So what did you guys learn from this stream? Not that, you know, streams I do are all about learning something, but you learned that um, don't watch Barney, because Barney sucks. Mr. Rogers is the bomb. Well, that was a popular thing when I was in high school, to say the bomb. It's the bomb, man. Um, on a serious note, Rocky, I think, is one of the greatest films ever made. Um, and how the history of comics. How did this medium of comics come to be? How did it get here? Why is it here? Well, it's here because human beings are creative, and human beings appreciate creativity. Robots don't appreciate nothing, because how can a machine appreciate something? It can't. It really can't. But man, I know that it's coming, man. The robots are coming. If you saw that the Chinese New Year show this last year, 2026, they were rolling them out. And man, those robots are doing backflips and all sorts of choreographed moves, and they're agile. And how they sort of programmed that into the brain of the robot was through a similar way like that they use to do motion capture for, you know 3D films, or 3D animated films, or 3D what's the word? You know what I'm talking about. How they create like creatures like Golem and the Hulk and all that. That motion capture uh, technology is really kind of a similar technology they used to program into the robots how to do all those moves. And then, so they were based on real humans, you know, real acrobats and stuff, and physical, uh, agile people. And then those moves were programmed into the robots. And then the robots are told or built to be aware of their 3D space that they're in, you know, the three-dimensional environment. So and have reactivity to it and all that. I mean, don't quote me. I'm not in robotics, nor do I claim to understand them. But that's my layman's understanding of it. Well, hey guys, it's been about 2 hours. This is what I was able to ink in that time. You know, I'd have to be here for another 2 hours to get it to where it's almost done. And I don't want the stream to go on that long. So I'm going to go ahead and call the stream. Join me next week. I'll be drawing another picture. Thanks for watching. Check out, you know, the website, LandonHuberStudios.com. Check out Instagram, Landon Huber Studios. Check out the playlist on this YouTube channel for more fun and interesting content. And be sure to be back next Saturday. Love you guys. Thank you. Have a good one.